Good morning, everybody. This is going to be your Aerospace 1 Chapter 8 quiz review. Um, in that chapter, we talked about the directional axes of flight. The first axis we're going to talk about is the axis that runs from the nose to the tail of the aircraft. We call that the longitudinal axis. It is very long. And that is the axis of which the aircraft would roll around that axis. If the propeller's right here, and these are the wings, if I twist that axis, it would roll. The next axis goes from wingtip to wingtip of a plane. And if I were to twist that axis, the nose of that airplane would pitch up and down. And the final axis, if I were to take that airplane in flight and I would stab a toothpick down the middle and I would rotate it, it would yaw left and right. Yaw is controlled by the rudder. Pitch is controlled by the elevator, and roll is controlled by the ailerons. The book is posted online if you need to see photos. We talked about systems also. So whenever we have, in a smaller airplane, we have a reciprocating engine, like in a Cessna. We know that whenever we inject fuel into that engine, we said that the fuel goes into a cylinder and then the spark happens, and that is what creates the energy to turn that propeller. We talked about several different types of engines. We talked about the turbojet, which is used on like a fighter attack aircraft. We talked about the turbofan, which is used on big airliners. And we talked about the turboprop, which is used on smaller aircraft that still have the need to go at a higher rate of speed than just a standard propeller. When you look at a wing, if you look in the back of the wing, you have the flaps and the ailerons. And if you look at the front of a wing, that is where you would have the slats. And the slats act just as the flaps do to increase the surface area of the wing to allow the plane to fly at a steeper approach while maintaining a slower airspeed for landing. The two types of fuselages we went over when looking at the design of an aircraft was a monocoque, and that is a type of fuselage that the Wright brothers used. And what that means is that the majority of stresses on that airframe were supported by the skin or the fabric in the Wright brothers' place. More modernly, we use what is known as a semi-monocoque design. And a semi-monocoque is that a lot of stress is still supported by the skin of the aircraft, which is usually made out of aluminum, but it is also, it has ribs and spars and anything that could be used to help support the structure of that aircraft. So like a skeleton. So that's what semi-monocoque means. We talked about several different types of landing gear. We talked about a conventional landing gear, which means you have two main wheels and a wheel in the back called a tail wheel. So I want you to think about the old Red Baron whenever you think of conventional. And even though we do not fly them as much anymore, we call it conventional because that was the original style of landing gear. The next style of landing gear we spoke about is called tricycle, and that is more modern, where we have two main landing gear and a nose landing gear. And it looks, you can think about it because it looks like someone riding a little tricycle around. The last type of landing gear we talked about, we call it in tandem, which means that is the type of landing gear that is on a giant airliner. If you look at the main wheels, it'll have several wheels side by side. That's what tandem means. We got into the basics of engine instruments. The main purpose of these engine instruments is it can be classified into two major groups. So the two major groups are called performance and control. Performance is like your engine gauge, and control is like your heading indicator, so you know which direction you're flying. We talked about the vertical velocity indicator. And if you recall, all a vertical velocity indicator does is it tells you whether you're climbing or descending. It does not give you your altitude. That is your altimeter. We talked about the attitude indicator. And what that is that is a gyroscopic instrument that shows your little airplane on a horizon. And that's so you know what the plane is doing. If it's pointed nose up, nose down, if it's rolled over the horizon. So that's what the attitude indicator does. The last thing we spoke about in Chapter 8 was supersonic vehicles. We said that something that is subsonic is flying below Mach 1. Something that is supersonic is above Mach 1, or the speed of sound. And something that is hypersonic is flying above Mach 5, or 5 times the speed of sound. Whenever a vehicle is flying above the speed of sound, there is going to be a shock wave attached to that aircraft's or airframe's leading edge. Anyway, I know this was quick, but I hope this helps. Good luck.